Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour. One of the things that over the years, or one of the greatest influences on me, was the great English writer Colin Wilson. And I was very saddened to discover that Colin died yesterday, I think it was, after a fairly long illness from what I've heard. I know that there are many British individuals and probably individuals in America and in the English-speaking world that were profoundly influenced by this great mind. I first came across his work when I read the book The Outsider, which was his version of Camus' The Rebel, which I thought was probably the most erudite and brilliant synopsis of exactly what it is to be an outsider. And what I liked about him was his writing style, because you felt that you were learning something on every page. And I tried, probably very inadequately, to actually mimic that writing style. I was in contact with Colin when I first started my adventures as a writer, and he was extremely helpful at that time. And indeed, I was delighted when he wrote a review of my first book, when he said that it reminded him of his favourite movie, Groundhog Day. And he considered that my book was like an event on a Big Dipper, which I thought was wonderful. So wherever you are, Colin, your great mysteries that you were interested in throughout your life, you are in a position now of probably being a little bit more aware of those mysteries and exactly whether there is life after death and exactly what state we're in when we go there. But rest in peace, my friend. You influenced an awful lot of us. Okay, more to the game in hand. Many years ago, a friend of mine called Gary Plunkett, who lives in Chester, invited me to do a talk at one of his groups in Chester. And while he was there, he turned around to me and he said, there is a friend of mine called Dr. Manjir Samanta Laughton who you really need to talk to, because her work is very similar to yours. And in fact, in many ways, the two of you could meet in the middle, in the sense that the way she's doing the cosmology and you're doing the neurology. And I managed to get hold of Manjir's book, Punk Science, which came out back in 2006. In fact, it came out the same year as my first book came out. And I thoroughly enjoyed it when I first read it, and I was very keen to get to know Manjir's work better. Manjir, by background, is a physician. She's a doctor. She's an MD. And her story of how she came to write about the things she does is intriguing in itself. But also her work now, she's a much broader individual than simply her writings. I mean, she's an international lecturer. She travels the world talking about her ideas. And she has the most phenomenal explanatory hypothesis about the nature of reality, which she calls the black hole principle. Now, unlike many hypotheses that we actually have in all the alternate world that we discuss, this is powerful in the sense that some of the things that it's actually predicted will happen have now been scientifically proven to happen, which is fantastic news as well, and very much a vindication of the depths to which Manjir actually goes in terms of her work. So with further ado, I'd like everybody to say hi to Manjir, who is up in Buxton, as I recall, in the northwest of England. Manjir, very welcome. I'm delighted to have you on the show. One of the things that I'd like to start with is in your many interviews, you've mentioned the event that changed your worldview from being a very skeptical, based in science, coming from a long line of doctors and physicians, and very grounded in a materialist worldview. But there was an event that happened to you that changed all that. And I know you've hinted on this in certain interviews, but I'd like to get to know a little bit more of exactly what happened and why.
Right, I think, hi Tony, great to see you again. What you're referring to is what is known as a Kundalini experience, and for myself, I didn't know what that was when it happened to me, and I was, as you say, very sceptical. I came from a very medical background, and it was understood that I would go into medical school, and that's what you were supposed to do. And so I didn't really think what was going to happen after I got in, and but to my surprise, I didn't really like it. I was very unmotivated. And I think something came in to sort of, when the universe, when it happens like that, something comes in that's exactly right. And you know how when you get to college, you get signed up, you sign yourself up for all sorts of sports teams and this and that. A friend of mine signed me up for a yoga class, and I've been doing Tai Chi to help me through my A-levels. So I thought, well, this will be a nice addition to what I'm already doing. Turned up to the class expecting to do stretches and had my sweatpants on and everything. And instead, there was a picture of what I now know to be chakras. And I'm from a Hindu background, so I was looking at this chart going, what is going on? How come this is familiar to me? And these Sanskrit terms are familiar to me. I'm thinking, surely it's something that I've been taught by my father or grandmother or something. And and then suddenly got this message coming out of nowhere. Bear in mind, I'm a total skeptic at this point. You've learnt this in a past life. And it was like, but somehow, on one hand I was skeptical of that, on one hand I was, this is totally normal and I'm meant to be here. And so the group is called Sahaja Yoga. They're still in operation. I'm not a member of Sahaja Yoga. I don't endorse it. This is just what happened to me. And what they do, and I think they still do, is they play a tape of the guru who is now passed away. And she talks about putting your hand on various aspects, like on your heart, and saying a mantra within your own mind, repeating the mantra. And to my surprise, suddenly I had this experience. And what it's supposed to be is that you've got coiled energy in your sacrum bone, and it's supposed to come up through the chakras and out through the top of your head. Now, I've now reframed this in terms of black hole principal ejection. It's like a major black hole ejection of the being. But in those days, I didn't know that. So what it did for me is connect my consciousness to the universal consciousness. So whereas I was a skeptic on the outside, suddenly I knew what all of this was about, and I went back to the sort of Hindu text that my father tried to, read with me, and whereas they had been completely baffling before, I went back to them and I suddenly could understand them. So when the light had been switched on, I became a different person, and it led me on to all the insights that I've had ever since, really. I've been a different person since.
The actual Hindu text that you went to read, are we talking about the Vedas and such like? Which particular areas resonated with you?
Interestingly, it was Peter Russell's translation of the Upanishads, and later on I got to meet Peter Russell, which are beautiful. So if you can get a hold of that book, then do. And my father had it from somewhere, and I would try to read that before and then afterwards, and it was a completely different experience.
Wow, intriguing. So here you are, you're a medical student, and suddenly you have this incredible experience that changes everything. But in your book, in Punk Science, you mentioned that you'd always questioned beyond the normal questions that you'd expect when you were, say, doing A-level biology as to the structure of cells and how cells functioned. So clearly you were already asking the right questions, as it were. And in your book you mentioned some of these questions that you were asking at that time, and they very much intrigued me because it gives the background to exactly how you see the universe now. So would you like to explain a little bit about molecular biology and why it is curious and it is strange within the human body?
Yeah, I think I always have questions, and I think that's part of why I went into science, because I was seeing people in India worshipping, one religion, and then they were good people, and then the people in England worshipping baby Jesus and what you get taught in sort of children's school in England. And I thought there must be something that's fundamental beyond that, beyond geography and where you happen to be living. So that really was the first thing that put me onto science in general. I wanted to find something that that was fundamental rather than something that was just related on how you're brought up and who you happen to be surrounded by. What was the truth? And so in biology, I used to look at cell division and how all the chromosomes would line up. And of course, I was looking down microscopes myself and seeing this sort of chromosomal dance happening. And, so I'd be thinking, well, how is it that these molecules, which have no brain in them, it's all the intelligence and structure comes from neuronal impulses, and how is it that they know what to do? How is it they know where to go? And I didn't really get a good answer then, or even in like embryology when I was taught that in medical school. And so I was very disappointed with the sort of answers that I was getting. And so my question in the book is, how did dumb molecules know what to do? And I noticed that Paul Davies, the physicist, asked a very, very similar question. How do stupid atoms know what to do? So, you have to bring it down to, I guess, simple language to really point out some fundamental truths.
Yeah, because it's very true, isn't it? Because there is this, because I found when I was at school that some of the questions I was asking, there were no answers to, because particularly in sciences, you just have to take it as fact, that it does this because it does it. Whereas I think more perceptive individuals, not that I consider myself to be any more perceptive than the average, but if you're a slightly deeper thinker, you're wanting to know, well, but why does it do that? There's the why question behind everything that happens. And I recall myself being very, very intrigued as to why certain things happen the way they do. And I know you touch upon it in your book, but it's very much, and I don't know whether you reference it directly by its general term, the cosmic anthropological principle and the idea that everything within the universe seemed to be hardwired for the evolution of sentient beings and conscious entities right from the first few seconds of the Big Bang. And, why is the world like it is? Why is there matter rather than no matter? And indeed, one of the biggest questions of all is, why have we developed consciousness and self-referential consciousness and altruism? Because all of these things, if you take, the idea of nature red in claw and tooth, and the idea that we're only trying to survive because we're just trying to survive, altruism doesn't fit in. This wanting to care about one's fellow human beings. And one can argue, oh, well, of course, it's DNA protecting itself. In other words, there's a DNA string and therefore it's the DNA trying to do it. But to me, it's greater than that. And I would imagine that as a doctor, you were being very much forced down this mechanistic, worldview. That, if you take things apart into the bits, you'll find something. But of course, that's not the case. And this is exactly what you then started to do, wasn't it? You started to then question things and follow things through. So how did the book, Punk Science, by the way, a wonderful title. I just think that's an absolutely superb title. And again, I love the subtitles within your book as well, which are very, very good. And people who have grown up in the 70s will pick up an awful lot of the very, very clever little jokey things. I was expecting Seek Sputnik to be in there somewhere. I didn't actually spot it, but it probably would be somewhere. But effectively, how did you start with the concept of punk science, and how did you eventually develop the idea of the incredible idea of the black hole principle?
Gosh, that's a big question.
It is, isn't it?
So, thank you. I do talk in the preface of the book that I actually started. The whole punk science thing came to me as one vision about early 2001, and I was still working as a GP at that point, and so which is what I eventually trained in, and I just kind of got it through. I was sort of in a sort of meditative open space, and I got it through, and I got it through with that image of an atom with a safety pin going through it, which is really one of the very few logos you see in life, which encapsulates the entire concept. So that's what came to me, and later on when I got a publisher, I conveyed this to the designer who executed it brilliantly. Oh, you've got it there. It all came through. It all came through, the sort of whole sort of Sex Pistols colours and this, that and the other. And so I thought I was going to write a book that was going to be a bit like, because I read people like Amit Goswami and, all of these wonderful writers, but I noticed that they were quite wordy and lengthy, and I love the way that GCSE textbooks are, which is very, very simple. If you look at the shift between the exams that we in the UK, that used to be the old O-level, and then they became something called GCSEs. I think I was the second year to do that. The shift that happened in the textbooks was that instead of being very wordy, they had very, very clear language. They were, list-based, colour, and I noticed just how much easier it is to learn when things are simply put like that. So I wanted to actually write a simple book, which I actually spent time taking the jargon out of punk science and then peppering it back in again. And I don't just mean jargon, I mean difficult English words that a lot of people are maybe not so familiar with, that I even tend to use in my everyday. But I know that if you have words that are perhaps not in everybody's vocabulary and can put people off. So I wanted to just talk about things like the holographic universe, non-locality. That's where I thought I was going, and I was speaking around the country from about the year 2000, maybe even earlier, and having great response. And I use the audience as a sort of feedback mechanism to what works, what doesn't, what's clear and what isn't. And that way it was a kind of crucible for really growing the book. What I wasn't expecting was that I was going to discover a theory of my own. I mean, that was just something I just didn't set out to do. It was kind of like, seeing the way that medicine was, which was very, as you say, mechanistic, getting frustrated with that. And it was especially while I was doing pediatrics and sort of seeing children who had cancer, who were so young that they had not yet decided on a paradigm. Yet the society was subjecting them to the mechanistic paradigm and, giving them all the sort of very, very toxic cancer therapies that we have now for these children. And I was looking at a particular boy who had leukemia, thinking, my goodness, I know, because by that time I'd trained as a bioenergy therapist, and I thought, I know what success I'm getting from bioenergy, and could it be that we could use things like that in adjunct to the therapies that we've got in orthodox medicine? I wasn't saying throw the baby out with the bathwater. I was thinking, what if we could actually use to complement each other? And I thought the barrier is that most doctors don't understand physics, and they have no idea about quantum theory. It's a completely different world, and their knowledge goes down to the molecule and the lock and key hypothesis, and most doctors' science really ends at that. And they don't understand all the amazing things that are happening in physics, like wave particle duality, string theory, quantum gravity, all of these amazing things which make us question the nature of reality. And they're stuck with that old paradigm, the very Newtonian paradigm. So that was kind of my aim, and I didn't expect, to bring through so much. There was always something almost like at the back of my mind. There was something to do with light, and there was something to do with black holes. And I did come across some people, like a guy in New Mexico. Gosh, but his name's just got John Molesky. And I started to go to the Science and Consciousness Conference in New Mexico, which is, I think out of that a lot of things have come out, like Lynn McTaggart's The Field. I think she visited that conference. What the Bleep, they used to visit that conference, those people. And, John Molesky started to talk about light, super light coming out of black holes, and that being the fundamental, and something about that really, really of caught me. There were all sorts of things, Hawking radiation, that led to sort of one really pivotal moment. And that led to the sort of theory that I've now been talking about. Do you want me to go on to that? Or?
Yeah, please tell us about the pivotal moment.
So there's a lot of things in my life that actually led to me being freed up as well, to having that, like the breakdown of my entire life happened really in 2002. Everything sort of material got completely shaken up, marriage, home, career, everything, to the point where I found myself walking in the woods, the only thing left for me was this scientific work. That's what the universe will do if you have to be on a certain path. So, and that would be my sort of dirty secret for. I'd done that in secret, keeping it away from my medical colleagues, of course, because they'd think I'm completely nutty. And so, indeed, I had a big incident in my life. I write about it in the Genius Groove, my second book. And so it led to this point where I was walking in the woods with my dog and trying to work out why, instead of black holes all being sort of sucking everything in, that the evidence was showing that they were actually giving out loads of radiation. And so I was kind of puzzling on that when I took a break from the walk, and I decided to sit on the branch of a tree, and for some reason, and I don't know if you know a guy called Brian Swim, who's at the California Institute of Integral Studies. Have you heard of him? No.
No, I haven't.
No, right. Well, I saw a short glimpse of one of his videos, which look amazing. I've not watched the whole thing. Canticle to the Cosmos, and and my healing teacher had come across this video when he'd broken down in Ireland, and a bunch of nuns that he'd gone to get help with his car had given him these videos. Amazing, isn't it? And I just happened to watch a little bit where Brian Swim says, we never tune into the rotation of the planet. We know it's rotating, but we don't sit and realise this. And for some reason that day, I decided to tune into the rotation of the planet, just remembering that video. And it was that moment that really changed my life, because I suddenly realised that I was totally thrown into, it wasn't so much a vision as my own consciousness mixed with the universal consciousness. And I realised we've got it completely the other way around. Black holes are not just, these destructive things. The radiation's coming out of black holes because black holes are creative. And that's the big sort of insight that I saw. And I saw the way that the particles are coming out of black holes. There's actually light that comes from the centre of a black hole, from the infinite core, the sort of singularity at the core, and it spirals around, sort of slowing down, although those aren't the correct terms, because really we're talking about an outer space and time sort of process, and it gets to the edge of our reality, which is what we call the speed of light. And then at that point, the particle of light, the photon, splits into the matter and the antimatter, the electron and the positron, and that's why we see positrons and electrons coming out of black holes at almost the speed of light. They've only just slowed down to reach our reality. And I realised not only does this happen in the supermassive black holes at the centre of galaxies, it's happening at every single level. And I spent some time, the same sort of principle going from the atom to the sun to the planets. I spent some years just amassing the evidence for this, from astrophysics data, from various areas of science, and mainly the astrophysics though, even to the point where I started to realise that this theory can make predictions. And so when I felt that the evidence had got enough evidence, I went on, and it was, well, actually a publisher appeared. When the time is right, this is the sort of thing that happens. And and the book got published in 2006. So that's the story of the book, how it all came about, really.
Well, it's one of the things that has always intrigued me about the anomalies within physics, and I know you touch upon it in your book, the problem that if the universe is 13 billion years old or whatever we claim it is at the moment, is why whenever we look in any direction in the universe from our point of view, we see the same structures in the same way going off into the dim and distant past. And it's either the Big Bang actually started here and everything is spinning out from it, but also the great mystery of why it is that as you look into the past, as you look into the light waves that are coming from the further reaches of the universe, the galaxies themselves don't seem to show age. In other words, you would expect if you saw a time-lapse photograph of a person, you would see a child, then you'd see a teenager, and then you'd see an adult. But we see exactly the same shapes wherever we look. I think it's called the flatness problem or something. And this... This never made sense.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and it never made sense to me as to why this can be. And when I read your book, what particularly intrigued me was this application of superluminal speed and subluminal speed, and the idea that the speed of light is not the barrier that Einstein said it would be. There are certain particles of light, photons of light, that actually travel faster than light, and it's their natural state. And it was when I was reading your book and I thought, of course this explains Dirac's idea of the positron and the electron. And would you like to explain a little bit about, for the scientists and the people that are going to be listening in who are really interested in the science of this, exactly how you apply your ideas to the idea of matter and antimatter and how they function, and how superluminal and subluminal speeds work together as well to create the universe, the greater universe that we exist within?
Wow, another massive question. So I'll try to do this because I usually use visuals to help explain things. So if the black hole principle is working at every single level and it's creating everything, then when the light gets to the point where it reaches what we call the speed limit of the universe, the speed of light, but it's not really. You've got all of this, what we normally call dark matter and dark energy. It's actually the stuff that's beyond what we call the speed of light. And I really recommend, if you haven't got this already, a book called Faster Than the Speed of Light by Dr. João Magajo. And he's a physicist at Imperial, and to actually look at the VSL theory, which is the varying speed of light theory, to try and help answer some of these questions about the flatness and horizon problem in cosmology. And also, interestingly, how Einstein himself came up with the VSL theory. And people often forget that it's when Einstein created his famous, dictates. It was, he said nothing with mass can go faster than the speed of light, because as you approach the speed of light, you get infinite mass. So nobody is violating that principle. So that's a very, very good book as to, mainstream physics and how they are even looking beyond these ideas. So with the black hole principle, you get to the edge of our reality, and what I saw and what I realised from Bill Tiller's work and from William Tiller's work and other people is that there are actually then the split of the sort of mirror worlds, like there's what I call the below sea worlds, which is the C is standing for the speed of light, and so that's the sort of physical reality, sort of what we might call the 3D, 4D world. And there's also the complex, the mirrored with that is something called the C-squared world, and that's where I think the missing antimatter is. So the two are mirror images, and but the two ultimately they cancel out. And the C world has got a timeline that goes forward, and the C-squared world that we would see going backwards. it's kind of like that. That's where the future sort of lies, where it's going future to the present, as we would see it. So ultimately, time cancels out. But what we are doing in our reality is seeing things from the perspective of C consciousness, of speed of light, below the speed of light consciousness. So we see children growing up to adults. We don't see the other way around. We see a timeline, what seems to be a forward timeline, and it helps to really reconcile why it is that relativity says that there's no time, and yet we see a sort of passage of time, because when you get the sort of three zones, the C squared and then beyond, into the timeless, you've got the timeless and you've got the timelines at the same time, and it's almost like light is playing a game, playing a game of disguise and splitting itself into apparent opposite charges, when all along it's like you've quoted David Bohm, it's frozen light. So that's where that comes in. Yeah. So and when you take it down to sort of Dirac's work and this idea that the electron jumps and you've got you're left with this positron hole and etc. If you look at it in a slightly different way, what you see is the same sort of positron and electron sort of combination and coming apart and jumping up and down the energy levels as you do in the black hole breathing process. So just to complete the theory, it doesn't just go one way where you have the light splitting. You've also got the recombination, and that recombination actually gives off light, usually in the form of gamma rays, and that's what I'm saying causes the gamma ray bursts that we see all over the night sky, to the point where we had to even like Giovanni Amelina Cameli, I think I've got his name right, actually came up with something called W special relativity to actually try and explain why these gamma ray bursts are so powerful, because they seem to just defy all of the laws of physics that we know about. So what I'm saying is that they're part of the breathing black hole process, and you actually see this breathing process in gases around the Milky Way. Around the core of the Milky Way. So there's a supermassive black hole in our own galaxy, and we've been able to measure this sort of breathing process. So what I'm saying that we should see is we should see oscillations that seem to us to have no pattern. They're not explosions, it's the breathing process of the black hole. A lot of cosmologists are thinking, astrophysicists think in terms of collisions, explosions, and therefore it doesn't make any sense as to why you see the gamma ray bursts going up and down and having these oscillations. Why it's suddenly very bright and then suddenly not very bright? It's not an explosion, it's this black hole principle breathing process. And the same happens in the atom. We take advantage of it, in our neon lights and all of these sorts of things. We're using this process of the electron getting excited. I mean, how many things do in modern day use lasers? This sort of excitation process of electrons. So it's a sort of breathing process of the electrons is the equivalent of the breathing of the black hole, the supermassive black hole at the core of the galaxies. It's all happening in the same way, just at different levels.
And how does this, one of the things, again, in your book, you talk about the Fibonacci sequence, you talk about the way in which the golden mean, and the way in which there's mathematical processes within this, even within the shapes of galaxies themselves. And again, I found that quite intriguing, the idea of why it is the galaxies are shaped the way they are, and how it can be mirrored within, as above so below, within the human body, within the way in which we function, and indeed how the brain itself functions and how consciousness functions. And it seems to me that what you're doing is you're coming towards a very, very powerful total explanation for the observed phenomenon we see, because, I mean, gamma ray bursts always used to intrigue me, because I came from the classical school. A black hole is something, the gravitational pull is so powerful that the escape velocity is the speed of light, and therefore light can't escape and everything is sucked into it. But of course don't you have the Schwarzschild radius, you have all these kind of areas around that suggests that this is actually a creative thing. It's not a destructive thing. It's more powerful than that. And I know when I was surprised when I started reading some of the material of Stephen Hawking, when he was talking about the universe actually being full of micro black holes, and that black holes are everywhere. They're not just huge, massive things. They can be extremely tiny, and they can be inside the nucleus of an atom itself. In which case, this then brings us down to a topic that I've been very keen to talk to you about, because it's an area we're both interested in, is the vacuum, the quantum vacuum, quantum energy, and the idea of the Akashic field, the Akashic record itself. So would you like to talk about how that then relates into your hypothesis as well?
Well, it gives a kind of wider view of things like the quantum vacuum. And I was actually at the Institute of Physics when I heard Michael Green, the string theorist, and I've never been able to find this quote, but he did say that Heisenberg's original calculations about the quantum vacuum were that it was a sea of black holes which had infinity at the center. And if you look at what the quantum vacuum is, it's photons splitting off into matter and antimatter and back again and cycling, which is, of course, exactly what I've just described happens at the edge of a black hole. And Stephen Hawking started to allude to this in terms of Hawking radiation, that the same quantum vacuum cycling would be happening at the edge of a black hole. So what you have in the quantum vacuum, and Heisenberg did not trust his original calculations because he didn't like the infinities, is you actually have in this new framework, it's the cycling and the breathing process of the black holes that were everywhere happening again. So you can start to put quantum physics into this new framework. Why do you see multiple possibilities in quantum physics? Because you're getting to the edge of what I'm calling the perception horizon. Whenever you get to the edge of anything, be it the Planck's constant or the speed of light, you start to go into the infinite possibilities that are beyond the sort of what the C world, as it were, the C and C squared world. You're going beyond those possibilities into the infinities, and that's where we get these infinite choices. And so what we're doing with quantum physics is we're glimpsing beyond, and then and the way particle duality then is bringing those infinite choices into the sort of C world consciousness, is sort of what we call our everyday world. So it's actually giving a different framework and bringing that all together. So I was just amazed when I heard that being said. But gosh, you talked about a lot of things. I was trying to react to some more of them. The predictions that it's been made, the theories made as well. In terms of gamma ray bursts, of course, when I first published in 2003, was when I first published my first paper on this. We didn't know that there were things called terrestrial gamma ray flashes, and we have actually found gamma ray bursts within the Earth's own atmosphere. And
Can I stop you there? This is intriguing. So effectively, we have found within the atmosphere of the Earth gamma ray bursts within the upper atmosphere, I guess. So what does that? What does that tell us? That is an amazing statement, isn't it? An amazing discovery.
This is amazing discovery, totally unexpected when it comes to sort of NASA and these sorts of people, but totally predictable if you to say the black hole principle is for real. So we have these they're called gamma ray flashes. the TGFs, terrestrial gamma ray flashes in the Earth's upper atmosphere, they're associated with lightning and thunderstorms. And of course, what do you have in lightning? You have very, very fast-moving electrons. And the current explanation for what lightning is that it's charge that builds up in clouds. Now, people have tried to measure this, and when they do measure the charge in clouds, there ain't enough. And so, it'd be funny if people hadn't actually lost their lives actually sticking, measurement kites into thunderstorms. As you can imagine, a very dangerous thing to do. We've actually know that there's not nearly enough charge built up like static electricity, but this is still taught in schools. And so when you look at all the patterns, you've got the gamma ray flashes got radial expansion at the speed of light happening in terrestrial gamma ray flashes in the Earth's upper atmosphere. Just as much power in these TGFs as you would do finding a black hole out in space. And you've also got these discharge of electrons. Now, my prediction, of course, would be that we would find antimatter coming out of these terrestrial gamma ray flashes. And, of course, that's what was found in, I think, early 2010 when NASA actually investigated it. So, total surprise to them. Of course, something that I was completely expecting. So, we're seeing this sort of same pattern at every single level, and we even see it in volcanoes. Volcanoes are periodic eruptions that we can't quite predict. They give off lightning. And if you look at the actual cyclones of, it's actually most of it water vapor, which I'll come on to, but if you look at the cyclones, they're not just random plumes that come out of volcanoes, they're spirals, and sometimes 5-lobed spirals. They're called mesocyclones. And when you actually look at it, it displays the same sort of phi ratio geometry that we've been talking about earlier. So when we start to look at things, and of course, therefore, if this theory is really going to be predictive, we have to predict that we're going to find antimatter coming out of volcanoes. And of course, we are starting to find these things coming from the Earth's core. They're called geoneutrinos. So we're now starting to find antineutrinos coming from the Earth's core. So these things are coming to, the predictions that I'm making are coming to fruition. And of course, one of the bigger predictions is about the nature of water. I don't know if you want me to go on to talk about that.
No, this fascinated me. Please do.
So the other thing, of course, with thunderstorms is, as we all know, the release of water. So back in about 2004, I was reading David Asher's book. I think just going for a little walk and reading the book, and I was in the beginning of a thunderstorm, and I looked up and I thought, there must be something to do with water and black holes, if I am correct, because the thunderstorm gives off the electrons, the gamma ray burst, and at that point we didn't know about the antimatter, but that was discovered later. Water must have something to do with black holes. It must come out of black holes, therefore. And I started to find some ancient indigenous knowledge that talked about water being very primordial and indeed other dimensional. That water was not just the solid 3D object that we think. There's something other dimensional, and that was in the sort of indigenous knowledge. I thought that's so fascinating that there is this tradition that water there's more to it than we know of. But I didn't really have the proof until 2011, when finally we actually started to discover that water does indeed spew out of black holes. And so it's combined with microwaves, so sometimes they call it masers. So we're getting these jets. The other signature of the black hole principle is these jets. These sort of bipolar jets that come out at sort of 180 degrees to the accretion disk of the galaxy, which now we know is not the accretion disk, it's a creation disk.
Very good.
Exactly. It doesn't fit. An accretion disk is supposed to, the jets are supposed to be as the stuff heats up as it goes down a plug hole. But if you look at the mathematics and the angular momentum that calculations that I have been in physics conferences where people are discussing this, it doesn't really fit. And you have to do extraordinary calculations just to make it fit. Nature is simple. You know, if you're standing on your head to do this calculation, it's probably not right. You know, so you've got these bipolar jets. So what we've got coming out of black holes now are these jets of water, H2O, would you believe it? And when we actually have started to look around, you can see them fine jets coming as comets on the moon, on Jupiter's moons, on Saturn's moons. You know, everywhere we're looking now, where we thought that water was quite rare, you know, we're actually getting water just coming at many, many different levels. And I live in a place called Buxton where it's well known that water comes out of the ground, and it's quite warm. You can actually go to the centre of town, get it for free. You know, it's just given out for free, and it is really quite warm when it comes out. Where is that energy coming from? You know, if the Earth is also showing these black hole principle, features, then that's what I'm saying is that's where the mystery of where Earth's oceans come from. It's actually the central black hole of the Earth, which is giving off these antineutrinos, these volcanoes, earthquakes, everything, and the water. So it's solving the mystery, which people really don't know why there's so much water on the Earth.
I don't know if you've, and I'm sure that Dia is probably bouncing up and down wanting to come in on this discussion, because this is called the H2O network, and Dia very much, water is profoundly important to a lot of the work that Dia does. Dia, are you there to comment on this? Are you listening in on this?
Yes, I am listening on this conversation, and I feel like I'm going to lose my mind. I am hearing...
I thought I'd bring you in. Join in.
I'm hearing the science of this. You spoke of the indigenous piece, and, you know, the earth keepers all over the globe, from the Native Americans to Afro-Cubans, to the Gaelics, the Irish, have used water to communicate with the netherworld. This is known. And the Hindus, are you kidding me? Water is the essence of life, the creation of life. You speak of these vortexes, these black holes, ironically, no coinkydink, that there's water, if you will, coming through these black holes as above, so below. So my question to you is, what is the bigger picture? What are these black holes bringing into matter, and what are they taking out of matter? Because there's a spiritual element. Is this a doorway, gateway? I'm biting my tongue because I'm waiting for you to talk about this, because you mentioned the indigenous piece. So what is your perception on this?
I think this is the gateway. It's the gateway for the creation of the matter and the antimatter. And you know, if the indigenous people talk about, they've got a tradition of higher dimensional water, and all of the creation theories have, primordial waters at the center. There's so many of them that do. And look again and see that it talks about the gods coming out of the primordial waters. What is that? So, you know, we've got to look again and see, is there a scientific case for saying that water behaves in a different way and is more mysterious than we first thought, and there's actually a kind of higher dimensional water that the black hole is a gateway for, and is bringing that through, and so at many different levels. So and also the black hole, it's like a fractal that goes throughout every single level of reality, and that's why we see the same everywhere we look in the universe. It's not about one big bang that happened 15 billion years ago. This is about continuous creation. It's a continuous creation universe. I was actually in I don't know if you've interviewed Gerald Pollack.
No.
Have you interviewed Gerald Pollack at all? No. He is doing great work on a fourth state of water, and how water in this fourth state is actually reactive to light. So if you shine light on this water, it behaves in a different way. It moves towards it. There's a number of things we can explore here. Is water how responsive is water to gravity? How responsive is it to light? Because I'm talking about one source, one force. Which to go back to John Molesky, this is what he said: the light that comes out of black holes gives rise to all of the forces that we know about. And I think when that split happens, water is somehow released. There's more work we need to do on this, but these are the sort of ideas I've been putting about, and the predictions that I've been saying have actually been validated by astrophysics in the last few years.
One more comment, and then I'm getting off the line. This is a fabulous conversation. And he knows I love water. Anthony has mentioned before in the past of the essence of black holes in the brain. So my question again to you is, as above, so below, so within, so without. We have these black holes in the essence of the universe that are spinning in all these different directions in the spiral, releasing water with the sacred geometry, if you will. We have the same sacred geometries on our chakra of the head. If you look at the hairline on top of our head, we have a galaxy, a universe, the geometry of the same thing in the cosmos. We have this in our brain, if you will. So do you perceive that this energy that is being sent out in the universe through these black holes can connect with the black holes in our brain and the sacred geometry of that black hole in the brain to open up people's consciousness to where they are able to have precognitive experiences, lucid dreaming, and all of these essences of weirdness in consciousness?
Absolutely, it's exactly what you said. And the way that I see it is that all of the breathing processes that are going throughout the black holes, throughout everywhere, everything is connected. And when something breathes one way, something else breathes another way, and there's no, everything is in push and pull. It's not exactly like this happens and then that happens. Everything is in this breathing kind of balance, and there's nothing that stays static. The change is, just as the ancients have told us, change is all there is. Taoism and everything. That's all there is. So it's just happening at every single level. So with the brain, when you there's some research to show that things like epilepsy increase during coronal mass ejections, that sort of thing. And so what is a coronal mass ejection? Well, if you look, you have antimatter cycling coming off these streams that are coming off off the sun. So in our own star, you're seeing these processes happen. By the way, in terms of the sun, recently we discovered we've got the chemistry of the sun completely wrong, which has led scientists to say we've got the way the sun works completely wrong. So it opens it up to go, well, what we do see is black hole principal behavior. You're seeing these periodic ejections that are coming from these sunspots. And so again, you've got black holes on black holes. Now, everything is connected. So interestingly, this study shows there's a correlation between that and epilepsy. And if you think of what you see in epilepsy, you see a sudden discharge of electrons within the brain. Now, I'm wondering if this is, this is a nidus of a black hole in the actual brain itself, and you're actually getting the discharge as you would in any sort of black hole process. And having been in A&E, an emergency doctor, and spend time with people who have just had a fit or a fitting, you do see many people who go into a strange state, describe what's known as an aura, and so people are in this interesting state, and they can have all sorts of experiences which I don't think has been studied well enough. So it could be that this is something going on where it's an interdimensional process, where the black hole is the gateway to higher dimensions, as I've described, which are beyond the speed of light, and what it can do is create a relationship between those dimensions and this one, and wherever that's expressed. So
and maybe it's the water that's making the connection, the communication highway, the water in our brain and the water in these black holes. Maybe that's like the conduit highway to connect with another world and to break into the Akashic records. I know from an indigenous standpoint, when we do mediumship, water is the essence of the process, the ritual, in order to commune with the other side of reality. So this is very profound. I have to get off the line, because when you talk about the essence of water, there's a reason why our brain is suspended in water. The essence of life in our body is suspended in water, with all of these sacred geometries and universes within universes. It's very profound, but let me get off the line. I send you so much love. This is such an intriguing conversation, and thank you, Anthony, for letting me express myself, because you know me too well. I was sweating like crazy.
I knew it. I absolutely knew you would be. One of the things that, from your conversation there, what my next project is going to be, I'm in negotiations with a publisher at the moment about writing a book on temporal lobe epilepsy and temporal lobe auras and everything else. And as you know, in my books, I touch upon it in most of my writings because it's something that has intrigued me for many, many years. And I was also reminded when you were describing there about the structures and the water and the reactions with the Akashic field and everything else, that this is another application or another way of getting round all the major problems that people have with the Penrose-Hamerhoff orchestrated reduction problem of the idea, when Max Tegmark turned around and said, well, it can't possibly happen within the brain because the temperatures are too high, and therefore you can't have a collapsible wave function within the brain because of it's too wet and it's too hot. But effectively, if we're talking that possibly the attunement, for want of a better term, is a relationship between inner black holes, sort of the Stephen Hawking micro black holes, and the microtubules or the intratrabecular structures within the brain. We've got a new idea here as to how information, bonian information, can be drawn up from the Akashic field, and I'm reminded here of the work of Irvin Laszlo, and I know you cite Irvin in your work, and the way in which Irvin's Akashic field, Akashic record, can work within this. So we have huge resonations here, and it's one of the things I put a posting on Facebook a couple of days ago where I was getting rather frustrated with an awful lot of my fellow writers in this field, because we're all working in silos and we should be working together. Because we all have a little bit that we can bring to the party, and if we can actually place this all together and have a conference or something and talk about where we're coming from, we might find the answers to the puzzle, because we can't do it alone, but we're all doing exciting areas of research here. Now, to finish off, because we're rapidly running out of time, but I'd like you to finish off with what projects are you involved in now, and what are you going to be doing in the future? And also,
well, I'm hoping,
and also finally your contact details, so our listeners can really get into your work, your very important work as well.
Well, I'll start off with that, and then punkscience.com is, if you go to that, you'll get to my main website, which is actually called Paradigm Revolution. Covers all of my work. But I've interviewed Anthony. I think you made a good point there, because we are working in little pockets. So punksciencemovie.com has the details of a forthcoming movie, and I'm very excited because it's just moving on that next step. We're creating a movie and a masterclass with various experts around the world, and that's really the spirit of the way that we brought that together. We've interviewed a lot of people who normally work in isolation, and brought it together to say, okay, what conversation emerges when you bring all these experts together. So that's something that I think is going to hopefully move towards more coherence between all these different people. So that's punksciencemovie.com. And I think you're also referring to the TV show. So it's suddenly become a TV presenter in the last few weeks. This is quite interesting. So I'm presenting Hidden Science on the People's Voice, which is a completely funded by crowdfunding, and it has been going sort of as a project since the summer, but it's only been transmitting for a couple of weeks, and so on that I'm hoping to get interview yourself as well. So so we've got various scientists. We're going to be talking about the holographic universe tomorrow, in fact. That's another project that I'm doing, and I've got a new book in the pipeline as well, which a publisher in the States is quite interested in, called The Magdalene Prophecies. So that's a sort of Gnostic side, bringing it together with a lot of the stuff that I just talked about, and looking at ancient civilizations and that sort of thing. So I'm a busy lady, and about to relaunch the website, so watch out for that as well. I'm going to be relaunching the website with a lot of info products and how to bring this into your own life as well. Some practical advice on how that affects your emotional health and the sort of health side of the sort of personal development side of the Black Hole Principle.
Right, and I know from what we were talking about before we went on air that you're now going to jump in the car and drive down to London from Derbyshire, from Buxton, to do the show tomorrow. And I wish you the best of luck with that, and I wish you the best of luck with all your work. I'm a great admirer of what you do, and I'm hoping that what we've done is giving you an opportunity here to dig a little bit more into the real deep science of what you talk about, because that's the one thing that impresses me about your work is it is incredibly scientific. It is extraordinary claims need extraordinary proofs, and that's effectively what you do, and you do it extremely well. Your writing style is fun, it's accessible, and I think that's what the most important thing is. These ideas are important, but they have to be accessible to the man in the street and the woman in the street to understand exactly why things are so exciting and why people like you and I get so animated and excited about everything. It's because it is exciting. We are at a huge paradigm change at the moment, and we're at the forefront of it, and it's an extremely daunting but exciting world that we live within. So thank you very much, Manjir, for joining me on the show, and I look forward to joining together with you on the TV show as and when we get the chance to get together in that. So again, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for listening in on this show, and hopefully, Manjir, we'll be talking again, I'm sure, because I know that there's so many exciting things happening. You're just about to start on something quite stunning, I think. And thank you very much. And again, thanks again to Dia Nunez for organising this over in Denver. Without Dia, we could not do this show, and my ongoing thanks to her as well. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you again next month.